Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Tarajata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhayacharna Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Tarajata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samavita Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Janitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning we were reading from Canto 3, Chapter 11, Calculation of Time from the Atom, text 39 and 40. Please repeat. Kaloyam Paramanvadir. Kaloyam Paramanvadir. Dviparardhanta Ishvara. Dviparardhanta Ishvaraha. Naiveshitum Prabhurbhumna. Naiveshitum Prabhurbhumna. Ishvaro Dhama Maninam. Ishvaro Dhama Maninam. Kaloyam Paramanvadir. Dviparardhanta Ishvaraha. Naiveshitum Prabhurbhumna. Ishvaro Dhama Maninam. Kaloyam Paramanvadir. Dviparardhanta Ishvaraha. Naiveshitum Prabhurbhumna. Ishvaro Dhama Maninam. Kaloyam Paramanvadi. Viparardhanta Ishvaraha. Kalaha, the eternal time. Ayam, this. Parama atom. Adihi, beginning from. Dvipararda, two super durations of time. Antaha, to the end. Ishvaraha, controller. Na, never. Eva, certainly. Ishitum, to control. Prabhu, capable. Bhumnaha, of the Supreme. Ishvaraha, controller. Dhamnamaninam, of those who are bodily conscious. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Eternal time is certainly the controller of different dimensions, from that of the atom up to the superdivisions of the duration of Brahma's life. But nevertheless, it is controlled by the Supreme. Time can control only those who are body conscious, even up to the Satyaloka or the other higher planets of the universe. Text 40. Vikarai sahito yuktair visheshadhi viravritah andakosho bahir ayam panchashat koti vistritah. Translation purport. This phenomenal material world is expanded to a diameter of 4 billion miles as a combination of 8 material elements transformed into 16 further categories within and without as follows. Purport. As explained before, the entire material world is a display of 16 diversities and 8 material elements. The analytical studies of the material world are the subject matter of Sankhya philosophy. The first 16 diversities are the 11 senses and 5 sense objects. And the 8 elements are the gross and subtle matter, namely earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and ego. All these combined together are distributed throughout the entire universe, which extends diametrically to 4 billion miles. Besides this universe of our experience, there are innumerable other universes. Some of them are bigger than the present one, and all of them are clustered together under similar material elements as described below. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So you might be wondering, how is it that we've come to discuss about such great personalities in our universe? Not only personalities like Lord Brahma, and in fact in these 2 verses, Srimad Bhagavatam is starting to hint of personalities beyond Lord Brahma, like Mahavishnu. But along with these personalities comes the duration of their lifetime. So that's why here it's mentioned 2 super durations. A super duration is 1 pararda, which is half the lifetime of Brahma. Lord Brahma lives for 2 parardas. So that makes up 2 super durations. But the chapter started with something rather small and atomic, which was the Paramanus. And the Paramanus are, Prabhupada translates them to be atoms. And according to Vaisheshikavad, which is propounded by Karna the Rishi, if you remember, some few weeks before we were talking, they have 2 qualities to them that they attribute, at least 2 qualities to them that they attribute. One is that they're so small, the Paramanus are so small and tiny that they cannot be divided further. It is not possible to divide them any further. So in that sense, they're unbreakable. They're insoluble. They have attributed to them the qualities of spirit. We see in Bhagavad Gita that in chapter 2, Lord Krishna also says the soul is unbreakable, nothing can affect it in any way. So the followers of Vaisheshikavad attribute these spiritual qualities to the Paramanus. Not only that they're so small that they cannot be broken or divided any further, but also they attribute the quality of eternality to them as well. So they say that the Paramanus, which are the essential building blocks of matter, of this material universe, they say that these Paramanus are actually eternal. And all these manifestations that we see around us, the form of trees, the form of physical bodies, the form of mountains and rivers, they're just a different conglomeration, they're just a different organization of these eternal Paramanus. When the universe is destroyed, all these conglomerations, all these structures of Paramanus, they fall apart, they disintegrate. But the Paramanus themselves, they are still existing eternally. That's what they propound. Now, one devotee after the class, he asked me the question, but then how is it that if different physical objects are just Paramanus coming together in different structures, how is it that different things have different color, different things have different smell, right? How is it that we have material diversity if everything is made up of the same building block? I'm not sure exactly the reason for this, but according to Vaisheshikavad philosophy, the Paramanus also have qualities within them which can determine an object's color, an object's density, an object's viscosity, and all these other material factors which are there. The Paramanus can determine that. I don't know exactly how it works, but this is what they propound according to Vaisheshika philosophy. So Srimad Bhagavatam is talking about time on, at least this chapter, is talking about time on 3 different scales. This chapter starts by talking about time on an atomic scale. Then Srimad Bhagavatam is talking about time on a universal scale. And then here in text 39, it's talking about time on an eternal scale. So you have atomic, universal, and eternal time. So atomic time, if you remember, Srimad Bhagavatam defines atomic time as the time it takes for the sun to travel across the diameter of one atom, of one Paramanu. That is the smallest conceivable material unit of time that we can measure. Similarly, universal time is therefore the time it takes for the sun to traverse over the diameter of all the practically unlimited Paramanus within the universe. That is eternal time. That is also equivalent to the lifetime of Brahma, which in our universe is 311 trillion 40 billion years. Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport of text 40, he's saying that our universe is this size, the universe of our experience, but there are innumerable other universes. Some are bigger than our one, some may be, well, it's said that ours is small because our Brahma has 4 heads. But then we see in the past time where Lord Brahma goes to Dwarka and he meets with Krishna, and then there's so many other Brahmas with so many other heads. So then we can sort of ascertain that these universes are much bigger. And therefore, the lifetime of Brahma must also be longer than it is
in our universe. So that's eternal, that is universal time. Universal time is the lifetime of Brahma. And then, now, Srimad Bhagavatam is talking about eternal time. I'm not sure if I mentioned it in Bhagavatam class, but when I was talking to one devotee, I think who I was talking to about it, Srila Prabhupada was initially in this chapter where he was talking about how time is only appreciated when we can see the effects that it brings. Right? So one of the 4 types of destructions is nitya destruction. We were talking about the 4 types of destructions last week. One is naimittika, which is the partial annihilation of this universe. One is naimittika, prakritika. Prakritika annihilation is the total annihilation of the universe. Atyantika annihilation is when the jiva annihilates, by practicing Krishna consciousness, his or her material conception of life and gets liberation. This is also one type of annihilation. And then there's nitya annihilation. Nitya annihilation is the constant degradation and destruction of material things. And it happens so slowly that it's very difficult for us to perceive. And Bhagavatam gives the example of growing of the hairs. Our hairs right now are growing, right now, but we can't perceive it. We can only perceive it after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, when we look in the mirror and say, wow, I need to get a haircut, right? Or the growing of our fingernails. Similarly, our body right now is also dying. Our material body is also dying. But we can only appreciate that when the body ages, right? We can't appreciate that when we have a young body or a youthful body. We can't appreciate that. So this is the nitya destruction. Forgot the point I was trying to make. Yeah, 4 types of annihilation. Yeah, eternal time. Anyway, I'll come back to that. Yes, so there's 3 types of time, these 3. And the other point which Srimad Bhagavatam is making, okay, I'll come back to that. The other point that Srimad Bhagavatam is making is about how time can control only those who are bodily conscious. So we see that verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, Ayur Hariti Vaipum Sam, that as the rising of the setting of the sun, those who are engaged in speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, time doesn't affect them. Oh yes, yeah, okay, time doesn't affect them. So when, I think one Mataji was giving Srimad Bhagavatam class a couple of weeks ago on Saturday, so she mentioned the same point. So I asked her, but we see that pure devotees, their bodies also age as well. They're also affected. But then she mentioned that time affects the physical body, but it doesn't affect our consciousness, because consciousness is the symptom of the soul, and the soul is beyond these things. So, if we look at Srila Prabhupada, for example, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that when he came to America and he established Krishna consciousness, he went through so much hardships for so long. Even in India, before he came to America, he was trying and trying so much to establish a society of devotees. But Srila Prabhupada mentioned that he never felt separation from his spiritual master. He also mentioned that there was never a point in his life where he forgot Krishna. We, because of our conditioned nature, we allow our consciousness to be affected, to be molded by material situations and circumstances. For example, at a certain time of day, we may feel a certain way, right? At nighttime, we get sleepy. In the morning time, maybe we're a little lethargic. We don't want to wake up. We want to stay in bed. But if we see pure devotees, whatever time of day it is, they're always engaged in Krishna consciousness, so that they're beyond material bodily demands. The 6 Goswamis were completely oblivious of the time of the day. They used to sleep just for like 1 or 2 hours a day, and they were busy writing bhakti literatures. They were busy chanting the holy name. To an extent, we can see that with our material vision in Srila Prabhupada as well. Like Srila Prabhupada, although materially speaking, he was an old man, but when he used to go on the morning walks, There are instances where his disciples were saying that he used to walk so fast, they wouldn't be able to catch up with him. All this while he's still chanting japa. Right? Or for example, Srila Prabhupada himself would also say that, look, I am an old man, then how is it that all these young youth are attracted to me? How is that possible? Generally, those who are young, the young generation is not so much attracted to associate with those who are have passed their time duration, their use by date. But we see that Srila Prabhupada, although materially old, attracted so many young people. So we can see that Srila Prabhupada's consciousness was not influenced by time in any way. So, but we allow our consciousness to be affected. That's why we're conditioned. Another point which can be raised in relation to this topic is that for those who are serious about their bhakti, for those who are taking their devotional service very seriously, and they're aiming to, I don't know, it may be going back to Godhead in one lifetime or developing pure love for Krishna, for them, their bhakti is their consciousness. This is an interesting point that I was told. Your bhakti, if you're serious about Krishna consciousness, your bhakti, your devotion to Krishna is primarily shown by your state of consciousness. You can perform bhakti in different levels. You can perform bhakti in different ways. You can perform bhakti just with the body, or you can perform bhakti with your body along with your mind and your consciousness invested in it. Just like one Srila Prabhupada's disciple, he was giving the example about how in the 1970s, in the early days, one of his services was to take out the trash, right? And he used to take it out, and he wasn't so mindful that when he was taking out the trash, that this trash has some relations, some connection with Krishna, with the temple. Okay, in this bin, there is Krishna's paraphernalia, flowers and stuff, which were used for Krishna's worship. And I'm so privileged that I'm able to take out this trash. So one devotee told him that, okay, if you're not conscious of Krishna when you're physically doing service for him, then chant Hare Krishna while you're doing Krishna's service. So when he used to take out the trash from the temple, along with doing that, he will chant Hare Krishna and he'll remember Krishna in that way. So there's two ways that you can do it. And this is exactly the same thing that happens to us, especially when we're chanting japa. Right? It's a persisting problem which we need to try to nip it in the bud. Prabhupada says Krishna consciousness is very easy. Chanting, the actual mechanics of chanting is very easy. It's just 3 words that you're repeating over and over again, and you just have to put your mind into focusing on these 3 words. But time and time again, we allow our mind to wander. So then that activity then becomes mechanical. It just becomes a physical activity. Okay, we just sit down or we're pacing back and forth. We're moving our fingers, we're moving the beads, and we're uttering some words, and that's it. We haven't invested our consciousness, we haven't invested our mind into the physical activity. That's a much more stronger way, powerful way of practicing bhakti, and the results will come much quicker if we do it like that. Because ultimately, our physical body doesn't matter so much, it's just temporary. But Krishna is looking at our mind. Is our mind fixed on him? Is our consciousness fixed on him? That's why in Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says, offer me a leaf, flower, fruit, or water, Krishna is not so much interested in what you're offering to him. That's why he says, I will accept it if you offer it to me in love. So it's our consciousness that Krishna wants. And that's the thing that we have to protect. So we should not let any other person, we should not let any other situation affect our Krishna consciousness. Otherwise we may go on mechanically and physically practicing all the different things, right? The external activities. Even it may be preaching. You may be out on the street, for example, maybe distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, and then some advertisement is there and your mind gets distracted. And then your whole attention is on that, and you may go on mechanically stopping people. I'm not saying that mechanically practicing bhakti doesn't bear any results. It does. It does. It will give you some, Krishna will give you his blessings, Krishna, and you will advance, but that advancement will be very slow. So the best way is to combine the physical activity along with our mind invested in that activity. So consciousness in relation to time, what I'm trying to say is that we should not let our consciousness be affected by time, the influence of time. In the Brahma Samhita, there's some very nice verses which talk about time as well. So this is a very famous verse, Agnir Mahi Gaganam Ambu Maruddishascha Kalastatatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Vishanti Yamcha Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Now we know that verse from the Bhagavad Gita, Bhumir Apo Nala Vayu Kam Mano Buddhir Evacha Ankarityam Me Bhina Praktir Ashtada. Krishna says that these are my 8 separated energies: earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then mind, intelligence, and false ego. This particular verse in Brahma Samhita expands on that. Lord Brahma is saying the 3 worlds, which are composed of 9 elements, so same elements, fire, earth, ether, water, air, direction. So now directions are included as well in this verse. Time is included. Kalas tatatma manasiti jagat-trayani. Time is also included as one of the energies of Krishna. Soul, our soul, is also an energy of Krishna. And the mind. All these are belonging to Krishna. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, from whom all these things, including time, originate, in whom they exist, and into whom they enter at the time of universal cataclysm. So time is an energy which exists, it's created by Krishna, it exists, and at the end it goes back into Krishna as well. And I'll come back to that point which I was sort of stuck on before it came back to me in my mind. There's another verse here. This is another famous verse as well. You probably all know this. Yachakshuresha savita sakalagarhanam Raja samasta suramurti rashesha teja yasya gya brahmati sambrata kala chakra Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. The sun, who is the king of all planets, full of infinite effulgence. The image of the good soul is the eye of this world. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, in pursuance of whose order the sun performs his journey, mounting the wheel of time. So the sun god, as he's moving around the Manasotra mountain on Bhu Mandala, and this Manasotra mountain is like a circular mountain range, a circumferential mountain range around Bhu Mandala. One of the wheels on the sun god's chariot is seated upon the Manasotra mountain. So this wheel is also seated or touching and rotating against this Manasotra mountain, right? And this wheel, it's explained in Bhagavatam, if I'm not mistaken, it has 12 different spokes to it. So there's 12 different subdivisions to this wheel. And as the wheel is rotating, the particular section of the wheel, which is in touch with the mountain, that determines the months of the year. So the wheel of the sun god determines the nature of time which the residents in Bhumandala are experiencing. So this is known, literally it's known as the wheel of time. And that, I don't know how exactly, maybe Prabhu you've read recently, 5th canto. It also determines the star signs, or the signs of the zodiac as well. They're also determined. Also the days and the nights are also determined by the movements of the sun god in connection with the wheel as well. And there's one more verse that I remember, which talks about time. This is sort of the last verse of the Brahma Samhita prayers, which starts with Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo. It's the famous verse where it says that in the spiritual world, every word is a song, every step is a dance, like that. So there it says, Nimeshardakhyavana Vrajati Yatrapi Samaya. So Srila Prabhupada, or rather Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, has translated that by saying that in Golok Vrindavan, where there is eternal existence of transcendental time, who is ever present and without past or future, and hence is not subject to the quality of passing away even for the space of half a moment. So the point that I forgot before, but which came to me just now, is that beyond atomic time, beyond universal time, and beyond even eternal time, which Mahavishnu is experiencing, is transcendental time. So time exists in the spiritual world as well. But it does not impose upon the inhabitants of Vaikuntha the effects of past, present, and future. Time simply is there for the pleasure of Krishna. And when I was speaking to you, Prabhu, about how time is only appreciated when it is experienced by other people. So this is the point I wanted to say, is that right now, here in Bhumandala, where we are situated, we are appreciating that time exists because we see things getting created and destroyed around us. At the end of Brahma's daytime, what will happen? There will be partial annihilation, and the universal waters will flood Bhur, Bhuva, and Swaha. So Bhumandala, where we are present right now, it will be flooded. There will be no living entities present in Bhumandala to witness the effects of time. Because we'll all be merged, if we are there at that time, we'll all be merged into the body of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. So there'll be no living entities to experience time when it is flooded, when Bhurbhuva is flooded. But those living entities who are staying in Mahar, Jana, Tapa, and Satyaloka, they can look down and they can see, hey, the bottom three planetary systems are flooded, and therefore they can appreciate the time because they're seeing what's happening at the end of Brahma's daytime. Right? They're appreciating. They can appreciate time. Then when there's complete destruction of the universe, prakritika, annihilation, then there'll be no living entities within the entire universe to appreciate the effects of time. So who is appreciating then? That is Mahavishnu. Because Mahavishnu is breathing out, creating universes, he's breathing in. So he's the original timekeeper. He's the original witness of time. But Srimad Bhagavatam is saying beyond that eternal time, which Mahavishnu is witnessing, is transcendental time. And that is the time aspect which exists in the spiritual world simply for the pleasure of Krishna and Krishna's pastimes. Now in the Uddhava Gita section, Krishna mentions several more things in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in regards to time. He says that we can appreciate that we took birth because we don't have memory necessarily of us taking birth. So Krishna is telling Uddhava that we can appreciate that we took birth by seeing and witnessing the birth of our own son or the birth of our own child. When we see children, our children taking birth, then we can appreciate, yes, like this, I must have also taken birth in the past. And then Krishna says, similarly, when one witnesses the death of one's father, Krishna says, yes, then it is to be understood that I will also follow that path sometime in the future as well. So we can appreciate our birth and our death by witnessing the birth of our children and by witnessing the death of our parents. And Krishna says, again on this topic, Krishna says that we can understand and appreciate transformations which are occurring because of the passage of time by observing three things in nature. He says if we observe the flame of a candle, we can appreciate the aspect of creation, maintenance, and destruction. Because we look at that flame, it is lit, it wavers for some time, and then when the fuel is run out, when the wax of the candle, whatever is run out, then what happens? It just goes. So Krishna is saying by observing and meditating on the flame, we can appreciate how time is influencing material things. The second example Krishna gives, in addition to the flame, is by observing the river. Right? Sometimes we have a morning tide. Right? So in the morning time, the waves, or well, depends, but the capacity of the river will be more. Especially if it rains, it will be more. The river may overflow. At a certain time of the day, the current of the river may be faster, and in another part of the day, the current may be slower. So Krishna is saying by observing the river, we can also understand how time has an influence on material things. And this one I thought was much more obvious, at least to me. Krishna is saying by observing the growth of a fruit on a tree, we can appreciate the passage of time. Just like we have a tree, a banana tree just outside there. And I've been seeing over the months, there was a banana flower, a purple banana flower, and then it opened, and then, like 20 bananas came out from that flower, and they're still green. For many, many weeks they've been green. We're hoping that they'll turn yellow soon, but you can see it's just over there near the sheds. So Krishna is saying, the fruit is there, and then if no one picks the fruit from the tree, then over a period of time it becomes ripe, and then it becomes overripe, and then it just falls down from the tree, and you can't use it anymore. So by observing the fruit, the birth of the fruit, the existence of the fruit on the tree, and then finally the fruit gets overripe, it falls to the ground, it dies, we can observe and appreciate the passage of time. And then Krishna adds on to this. He says something more interesting, or further interesting. He says that if you have a lamp, I'll finish with this point. If you have a lamp and the light in the lamp is always being created, exists, and is being dissipated, right? Constantly, the lamp or the fire is creating light from it, and the light is existing for some time and then diffuses away. We can't see that light anymore. But the person who is unintelligent, he says that, look, this is the light of the fire. This is the illumination of the fire. Completely misunderstanding that there's so many particles of light which are coming, existing, and going out of existence. But such a person says, this is the light of the lamp. Then Krishna says, if one observes the river, if you look at if you study a river, the water from the river may be coming from some mountain range far away, right? The ice melts, and then it flows down, and it passes through the river, and it may end up in the sea. But the unintelligent person who is standing on the riverbank, he looks at the river, points to the river, and he tells to his friend, this is the water of the river. Completely misunderstanding that maybe an hour ago, the particular water that he's pointing to was not the water of the river. It was maybe the water of some clouds or water somewhere up in some glacier. And in the future, when that same water was once part of the river, it flows out into the ocean, it will no longer be the water of the river. But at a particular instance in time, we say, this is the light of the lamp, this is the water of the river. Similarly, Krishna says to Uddhava to instill some renunciation in him. He says, similarly, our body is always undergoing creation, maintenance, and eventual destruction. Cells are being created, right? And then they exist. So even on an atomic level or cellular level, the cells are dying. But we look at a person at a particular instance in time and we say, this body is the identity of a person. When actually it is not. Because in the past, the bunch of cells that you're pointing at right now, these cells were not the identity of the person. And all the cells which you're pointing to right now and you're saying this is the identity of the person, in the future, this will not be the identity of the person. So it's very interesting. So it shows how Srimad Bhagavatam is giving us some understanding about how time is relative to different observers within this universe. And beyond a different relative time, atomic time, universal time, eternal time, there is transcendental time. Because everything, the Vedanta Sutra aphorism, the first aphorism is, Janmadi Asya Yatha. Everything here in this material world originally has its existence in Krishna and in relation to Krishna. That's why time does exist in the spiritual world, but it doesn't influence people living in the spiritual world in the same way that it does here in this mature world. And the last thing I wanted to say is the very fact that time in this mature world is destroying everything, it's completely annihilating everything, shows the supreme will of the Lord. Because time is Krishna. Krishna says in the Gita, time I am. And he tells Arjuna, all these soldiers are already destroyed, you just be an instrument, a nimitta matram, bhavasavya sachin, to enact my will. So time has the influence of destroying everything in this mature world. That destruction demonstrates the will and the desire of Krishna. Krishna wants everything in this mature world to eventually be destroyed, so that the living entities eventually come to the realization that there's no happiness here. I should strive for some permanent happiness elsewhere, outside of this mature world. Okay, so we'll finish here. Thank you. If there's any questions or comments. Okay, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.